Everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and as you know, this is the show where you dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. And one of the things that we've clearly uncovered matters most in business is trust and building high-performing teams. It's fundamental. And today I've got a guest who is, I would say, uniquely qualified to discuss the topic of trust and high-performance teams. And I'm pleased to welcome Captain George Dom, who's the founder of High Trust Leadership Network. He's also author of the book High Trust Leadership. George, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be with you.
It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this one for so many reasons, but I want to let you introduce yourself to the audience. And I kind of teased it when I said that you're uniquely qualified because, you know what, I'm going to let you just take it from there. Tell the audience about who you are.
Okay, thanks. Well, primarily I spent a career in the Navy flying fighters off of aircraft carriers, 26 years of Navy service. And during that time, I had the opportunity to lead several high-performing teams, an F-18 squadron in combat. I was the flight leader and commanding officer of the Blue Angels, and I commanded a carrier air wing on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and USS John F. Kennedy. And then after leaving active duty, I went to work in the corporate world in business aviation. And that's where I find myself these days.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I watch the Blue Angels perform, my first thought is, please God, nobody sneezed. But my second thought is, man, you've really got to trust your teammates here. So obviously, when I said you're uniquely qualified to talk about trust, that's what I was alluding to. Before we jump into the deep subject here, just real quick, what inspired you to write a book, and what can readers learn from it?
Yeah, interesting. Well, after I left active duty, I was working at a consulting company in Boston, and as I would meet people and they would find out a bit about my background, I was starting to get invitations to come talk to people and organizations and schools, executive MBA programs, and so forth. And because they were paying me a little bit of money, I wanted to give them 26 years of leadership in an hour or so. And while they enjoyed the stories and the videos and the photos, I really felt it was a mile wide and an inch deep. And there was a lot of it that people could get just about anywhere. So it made me think about what is one thing that is unique to my experience that I could share that they may not be getting much of anywhere else. And that's when I reflected on it and came to see that everything behind our success, whether it was flying off an aircraft carrier 1,000 miles from land at night or going into combat or with the Blue Angels or at Top Gun, it was all about developing and sustaining a culture of really unconditional trust. And so that's what I have been speaking about for quite a while. And so I finally got around to people would ask me, do you have a book? When are you putting out a book? And so I took all the material that I've been speaking about and condensed it and consolidated into this book.
That's really cool. Where can people find it?
It's on Amazon or Barnes & Noble on the websites. You can get it there. It's probably the easiest place to pick it up.
Yep, the usual suspects. That's awesome. Let's jump into talking about trust and how you define it, because I think it's fair to say that most of the people out in the audience who are listening to this program aren't dealing with life and death situations every day. So
Right.
their definition of trust may be a little bit different than yours. But talk about the definition of trust and then the parallels that you're able to extend in your work with the business community.
Yeah, of course. Well, I like the saying is that, if you want to go fast, then obviously go alone. But if you want to go far and you want to have significant achievements and lasting significance, then you must go as a team. And if you want to do both, then you build trust, because trust is it's the water that all relationships swim in. I mean, it's the psychological air for a business team. And some people think of trust as sort of, particularly when I talk to, type A sales guys, they start to roll their eyes back in their head because they think, oh man, this just seems kind of touchy-feely, kind of warm and fuzzy. But, in my experience on high-performing teams, trust was not just something nice to have. that you put good people together. It was a strategic imperative. We recruited for trustworthiness. We trained to build it every day. If you had it, you got recognized, rewarded, and promoted. And if you lost it and you couldn't get it back quickly, you were either sidelined or you were gone, because we just couldn't have it. And to your point about, yeah, people in the business world it's not necessarily life and death every day. Although I would submit, if you're in a low trust environment, it's a long, slow, painful experience in death. But anyway,
For sure.
my point is that if you can take these lessons that came out of a very extreme environment, which are instructive because we couldn't compromise, we couldn't look away. We had to find out what worked. And if people will take these lessons and apply them, yeah, they don't have to be way over to the far right of the trust continuum where we were. But if they could improve the level of trust 10, 15, 20% even, I think that we'll see significant improvement in all areas of productivity, retention, resilience, innovation, and so forth.
Yeah, loyalty, innovation. It's interesting because in my first book, which was The Journey to Prove that People are a Company's Most Valuable Asset, and meeting other thought leaders across the country, one of the chapters I dedicated to was about building trust and how trust was critical for innovation, because without that trust or an environment of safety where you can trust to speak your mind freely and spitball good ideas or bad ideas
Right,
without judgment, innovation doesn't happen.
right.
So clearly, trust is a strategic imperative, and you've mastered that in what you did day to day. You alluded to the lessons learned, and I know you talk about them in the book. Why don't we start to unpack some of those now? You call them the 5 C's of trust,
Right, right.
and that's C as a capital letter C.
That's right. Yeah. So as I look back on my experience, and we had it's a 2-year assignment with the Blue Angels in particular. Um, and as I look back on the 2 years I was the leader, um, I never forgot for a second the tragedy that befell our Air Force brethren, the Thunderbirds, way back in January of 1982, when they were doing a formation loop in training. And when you're flying that close together, literally 2 feet apart at 300, 400, 500 miles an hour, the wingmen aren't looking around enjoying the scenery. They are totally focused on this jet that's right next to their head. And so on this day, sadly, they were doing a looping maneuver, and the leader had a mechanical issue and didn't pull out and to make the bottom of the loop. And they put 4 T-38 fighters symmetrically spaced into the desert floor that killed all 4 pilots.
Mm.
So for me to be successful as the leader and for us to fly Blue Angel air shows, we had to get to a place where these guys would enthusiastically come to work, 6 days a week, and put their lives in my hands and mine in theirs. And so as I look back on that experience, there were 5 areas I needed to pay attention to. And I had to pay attention to all 5. If I dropped one out, there was going to be an issue that was going to percolate up. But the good news is if you pay attention to one, it reinforces the other 4. So you have this upward spiral of trust and confidence and all that comes with that, right, in terms of performance. And so very quickly, I'll go through these 5. And there were questions that my team was asking about me for each one of these. And depending upon the answers they discerned to the questions they were asking consciously or unconsciously, they would make a judgment to what level that they trusted me. And the first one was character. And the question was simply, do you walk your talk? Do you keep your promises? Do you live up to your obligations? Do you live our shared values? The second one was commitment. Now, my team was absolutely certain that I was going to show up to lead them with a smile on my face whenever the sun was shining and the sky was blue and the air was smooth. But what they wanted to know was, are you going to be with us when the going gets rough? Because they knew that during the season, we were going to go through some literal and figurative storms. Because that's sort of the way life is. You're either in a storm now, or you're coming out of a storm, or you're getting ready to go into the next storm. And what they wanted to know was, when we have to take a punch, are you going to, not only are you going to show up, but are you going to play your A game and be the best leader that you can be to lead us through the storm to success on the other side? And then the next one is competence. This is the one that we mostly think about when we're trying to make a trust decision, whether it's hiring or promotion or project assignment or whatever it might be, right? And competence is really necessary, of course. I mean, you have to be very good at what you do in order to be trusted. But I put it third for a reason, because I believe that if you don't get the first two, if somebody isn't walking their talk and living our values, or they're not fully committed all in, then the competence doesn't really matter. It's sort of we talk about the curse of the expert. I mean, you got a salesman who is making it rain, but boy, his manner and his impact on everybody else around the team is just toxic, right? So,
Yeah.
but if you can get the first two, if somebody walks their talk and believes in our values and is all in and has a reasonable level of experience and skill, you can pretty much often teach them to grow into whatever you need. So the question that every day I would see in the eyes of my teammates as we'd sit down for our pre-flight briefing, the question I'd see was, are you good enough to be our leader today? Are you better than you were yesterday, but not as good as you're going to be tomorrow? Because we don't want to stay here. We want to keep getting better and better and better. And by definition, we're never going to be any better than the leader is in terms of having an attitude of continuous learning and improvement. Okay, and then the next one is connection. And this is the one I think many leaders today have, if they've had it, they've dropped it off their radar, because we are all so busy and we all have these task lists a mile long that we're trying to get through, right? And I think Stephen Covey has it right in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he says, you can be efficient with things, but you can't be efficient with people. And too often leaders today are trying to be, have these hacks or whatever to just try to, to make connection with folks in a very efficient way. And it just doesn't work. And so you have to slow down and you have to go deep, because the question that is being asked is, do they believe you understand them? Does your team, do they believe that you get them, that you understand what their challenges are, what their hopes are, what their goals are, what their ideas are, and everything, so that ultimately they believe without a doubt that when you're making the tough decisions, you're taking them into account and so forth. And when they believe that, then they're going to join up and come along, even though they may have some anxiety about where you want to take them. They're going to suppress that and they're going to come along. And then finally, it's communication. If connection is, do they believe you understand them? Then communication is, do they understand you? Are you transmitting in a way that is clearly, concise, direct, and consistent, and making sure that you check that the messages that they're receiving are the ones that you intended? And so those are the 5 areas that I had to pay attention to.
All fascinating stuff, and so much to unpack there. But let me start by going back to the beginning, where you mentioned that I think you said it's a 2-year term for the Blue Angels,
Right.
and whether they're all cycling off or if it's just one rotating off each year, you're dealing with, in the business community, the turnover situation,
Yeah.
and integrating a new teammate and building that trust in what is, again, a critical situation. How do you do that?
Yeah. So actually, in the formation, you see the 6 jets with 6 pilots in the formation, and every year there's 50% turnover in the formation. So when you see the Blue Angel Air Show, realize that 3 of them are in their first year and 3 of them are in their second year. So 50% turnover in the formation. And then, the team is actually a team of 125 people. Most of them are the support personnel, the maintenance technicians and administrative and logistics and all of that goes into being able to operate 35 weekends a year from March to November in about 35 different cities. And so those folks, the support personnel, they're on a 3-year assignment. So there's 33% turnover among the support personnel. So your point's a great one. I mean, the velocity of turnover is extraordinary. And so when the team goes into winter training each year before the season, it's all about building a trust environment there, and people stepping up in order to be able to earn the trustworthiness that's necessary to operate. Yeah.
Yeah, George, I'm going to unpack this just a little bit deeper if we could, and maybe ask you
Sure.
to provide what we'll call it an actionable insight, if you will,
Sure.
because each of these five C's obviously critical, and I think it resonates with everybody. It certainly does with me. And I imagine there's a number of folks out who are listening to this program who have, if not one, several of these words written on some mission statement or on a poster in their hallways about being a core competency, core value of the organization, how they want to live their value.
Right.
Um, Words are great. How do you take these absolutely mission critical elements here and make it part of a company's DNA?
Right. Right. Well, you know, first of all, trust is all about it. It's not something that can be bought or coerced or demanded or expected. Trust is a gift, and it's a gift that you have to earn every day. And the axiom for these 5 areas is all about, you know, um, that in order to be trusted, you must be trustworthy. So it's an inside out thing where you have to work on developing yourself and make sure that you are living up to these 5 areas, right? And so what I talk to people about is, and when I meet with groups and do workshops and so forth, we actually do a personal action plan where, just imagine, down one column, on the left column is each of these 5, right, with the question associated with them. And then the next column is they put their name at the top of the next column. And as we go through each of the 5, they think about, what's one thing I can do to build my character muscle today, or to build greater commitment, and we get into what do each of these require. So for example, for character, you've got to know, okay, what are my core values? What are the things that I'm not willing to compromise on and that I can continue to develop in myself? For commitment, what is it that causes people to have just a tremendous level of commitment where they can just persevere through the storm? And I believe it's a very deep, a very intense, and a very clear sense of purpose. When they know why, in the military, we call it mission. When you know what mission you're on and why it's so important, and you stay in touch with that mission, that's what helps you get up whenever you're beat down or tired or discouraged or whatever it might be, right? So for each of one of the questions, they will list, what's one little thing that I can do today to raise my level of commitment, my level of competence? How can I get a little bit better every day at my job, and so forth? And then the next column, they put the name of somebody, a professional relationship that's important to them. It doesn't have to be the most important, but it's one that's important to them that they would like to see improve. And then they list one thing that they can do to demonstrate to this person that they walk their talk, that they are all in, that they are getting better every day, etc. Right? And then the same thing, the final column is somebody in their personal life that they want to improve the relationship, because I want them to know that this works at home too. And so they step through, how can they build a higher level of trust with that person.
Yeah, really good stuff. Continue to push and strive for better. In the business world, if we're working on projects, when the project's over, we usually do some sort of a post-mortem conversation. What went right? What went wrong? What do we do next time? And I know you do something similar in the form of the flight debrief, and I understand
Right.
that's pretty critical.
Right. It's absolutely critical. And it is the most important ritual that the team has that allows them to become, really elite in what they do every and they've been doing this now since 1946. And it's so fundamentally, the thing about a postmortem or a debrief is there's a million reasons not to do it, right? Everybody's so busy, and you get through with one project and you move right along to the next one, or you come out of an important meeting and you got something on your calendar 15 minutes later. So, stuff you never get around to it. So fundamentally, you have to do it. And you may not be great at it at first if you haven't done it as a habit before, but you'll get better. So my advice to people is just have it, and then you'll figure out how to do it better. Now, and also, by the way, you should schedule it when you're planning the event, when you're planning the meeting, whatever. You want to schedule it then. If you make it an afterthought, it doesn't happen, or it's very sporadic. And because you don't do it very often and it's not really expected, you don't get very good at it. So you got to do it all the time, like any skill, right? And you'll get better and better. So the way we did it, and this is interesting, we would walk in after we got done with the flight, and we would go into the debrief room, the conference room. We would figuratively take off our rank, and we would go in there as teammates, right? And everybody that was involved in the flight, whether in the air or coordinating on the ground, the support officers have various roles during the air show on the ground, and they have their perspective of what went on all together, making it a successful show. And so they would be a part of the debrief too, in addition to the pilots, but nobody else. You couldn't have any friends or relatives or anybody. We didn't want anybody else in the room that was going to potentially affect the level of candor in the debrief. We didn't want anybody holding back because they just don't know who this other person is or whatever. Because, building trust is all about being vulnerable. You have to be, as you mentioned earlier, you have to have this feeling of safety where people can express their concerns, their ideas, and everything in this wonderful culture of safety. So that's what we did to sort of sanitize the situation. And then interestingly enough, I, as the leader, would start the debrief. And I would start the debrief, and we called this general and safe is this portion of the debrief. And I would make some general comments about, how things went and, from my perspective and so forth. And then if there were any significant things that I did that may have affected the safety of the flight or any significant mistake, I would confess those, if you will. I would make a list of, here's the 2 or 3 things that that I did that I think are significant. And the reason that we do that is a couple things. One is it gives the wingman a great idea about the leader's awareness of his performance. Because if I'm making a mistake and I don't know it, we got an issue. If I'm making a mistake and I won't admit it, we got another issue. And so it also sets the example that, hey, people are going to make mistakes. As long as you are doing your best and it isn't negligent or willful, then, we accept that. And as long as you're committed to owning it and not doing your best not to let it happen again, that's all part of the process, right? So we accept that. And it sets the example for the rest of the team then of how we want them to be candid about their performance. And you really got this when somebody will confess something that happened that nobody else would have known if they hadn't shared it. But they're sharing it because they want everybody else to learn from it, and hopefully they don't experience the same thing. It's pretty cool. And then after I make my comments, then we go around the room and we go to pilot of jet number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the narrator, the events coordinator, even the flight surgeon has a role in the show, the maintenance officer, and each of them will share if there was something significant that they want to share with the team. It's this level of candor and vulnerability that's really important. And then we'll break it down, and watch the video and literally dissect the demo, because we want to find out what happened and then analyze why did it happen, because nobody has the full picture, right? We want to get the full picture, and then why did it happen, and then what can we do better tomorrow, and so we can continue to raise our game.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've done a really, I think, fantastic job here talking about how trust can facilitate the connection, the communication, um, the candor that goes with. I know that wasn't
Yeah,
one of your C's, but
yeah,
when I hear you talk about the debrief and
oh yeah,
somebody owning up to a mistake that others wouldn't have even known,
yeah,
that's like you said, that's when you know that you're doing it. You've created that environment of safety.
yeah.
But I imagine there's been instances in your career where maybe you didn't trust someone, maybe the trust was broken. Um, is that something that can ever be rebuilt?
Maybe not, but
Mm,
hopefully so. But there's chances where, because again, the person that did whatever they did or said whatever they said that broke the trust, uh, they don't get to decide when the trust is restored. It's decided by the other people in the relationship, right? And you may not be able to get it back necessarily, but most of the time, if you're earnest about it, and here I am quoting Covey again, is that you can't talk yourself into something that out you can't talk yourself out of something that you behaved yourself into. So saying you're sorry and being honest about it and genuine and sincere is an important first step, but it's only the first step. You have to change your behavior to prove to everybody that you meant it. And so too often people think that an apology is all that's necessary should be all that's necessary to restore the trust, but it's not.
yeah. We're getting down to the short strokes here, George, but I've got to ask you at least
Sure.
one more thing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So when you think of the Blue Angels, it's a small unit, so
Mhm.
high performing team, type A personality probably, but everybody gets the magnitude of the importance of trust
Right.
here. How
Right.
do you take everything we've discussed here and you sort of disseminate it across organizations and teams that are much larger than the Blue Angels?
Yeah. Well, that can be a challenge. And so, first of all, the leadership has to live it, right? People see right through it if you want everybody else to change, but you're not willing to do the work that's necessary. So the personal example is the foundation to it, and then I think you have to work at this every day, and you know I believe probably the best thing you can do is you make sure that you use some version of these 5 areas, these 5 questions as part of your hiring. I mean, if you don't hire for trustworthiness, then it gets really hard to change people or to, whatever. But if you can get basically the people that you hire are people that have shown that in the past they've demonstrated trustworthy behavior, then you can work on it from there. That would be my biggest pitch. Otherwise, like for example, connection can be very hard, particularly when people are in remote work settings and so forth. You have to work twice as hard to make sure that the people that are working remotely uh, feel like they believe that you understand them and get them. And it's much easier when you're working together in the same office, if you will, and bumping into each other. And there's lots of little interactions that go on all the time that reinforce. You learn about their wife and what's going on with them and so forth. Um, but when they're working remotely, that can be a challenge, and you have to be intentional about wanting to make sure that you build and sustain connection.
Yeah, no, I know too many leaders throughout my career that were of the mindset trust but verify, or even worse, start with no trust and make people earn it. So, as a leader, what I've always tried to do was implicitly trust my people, trust that I made the right decisions and bring them on, let them do their thing. And if they prove me wrong, then try to unpack that. What's your advice for leaders in terms of where do you start with trust?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You have to you're responsible as a leader, you're responsible ultimately for the outcome. So you have to set the guardrails and you have to set the expectations clearly. One thing that in the company I work at right now, an aviation company out here in California, I mean, we're very specific as executives working with our managers and supervisors about defining decision space. This is what I expect, and this is the area that I want you can operate freely inside of this. And I want you to do that. I want you to solve problems and seize initiatives. But too often we're not very as specific as we should be about what we expect from the folks that we're working with and what decision authorities that they have. But I like your idea is that, if people earn it, when in doubt, trust them. And then, but you can't, it's not a chicken rotisserie that you can set it and forget it. You have to pay attention. You have to stay. But as long as they continue to earn it, man, keep giving it to them. Because ultimately, as a leader, you want the leaders to only do the things that only they can do. You don't want them to be doing other people's jobs, right? You want them to be focused on their job. And you can't do that if you don't develop and then delegate your people so that they can operate at the highest level that they're capable of.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it seems like the micromanagers of the world are suffering from this lack of trust. George, I could talk to you for another half hour here, but unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay.
But I can't thank you enough for joining us. But before you go, tell the audience how they can connect with you, if they want to learn more about you, how they can work with you, et cetera.
Sure. So you can go to my website, georgedom.com, and there's more content there and so forth. And you can connect with me there. And then, of course, I'd love for you to take a look at my book on Amazon. And if you think it's of interest to you, love to have you pick it up in order to be able to start applying this stuff in order to raise the game of yourself and your team.
Yeah, lots of really good stuff in there. George, thanks so much for spending some time with us today on Behind the Numbers.
Wonderful, Dave. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
All righty. And I want to thank you out there in the audience for supporting this program. Really appreciate you watching, listening, and sharing and telling all your friends about this program. The growth that we've had in audience viewership, listenership has just been absolutely mind-blowing. So thank you so much for that. My name is Dave Bookbinder. I'm known as a business valuation expert. I help my clients value their businesses and their intellectual property assets. And if you're like most business owners and don't know the real value of your company, we should probably have a conversation. So feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. That's it for today, everyone. We will see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care.